Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of I Choose Happy, presented by The Comfy. I'm Marilyn Byrne, and on the show today, Melanie Hatchett. She and I go way back to our news days. She was my director in the control room when I was out on the set. She grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and met the love of her life, Monty, in high school. They were inseparable. Together, they ended up building a life full of family, adventure, and shared passions. Monty loved coaching their boys, guiding the family on adventures, and making every moment feel bigger than ordinary. Then tragedy struck during a scuba diving excursion in Monterey Bay.
It was supposed to be a normal day. And, with my husband, it was like one of those things where we didn't just go have a picnic. We had to do something bigger. Like, it's not just going to the beach and building a sandcastle. It's let's go scuba diving. And so we went down to San Carlos Beach, and Zach was he had been certified scuba diving for about 6 months, or maybe even longer than that, because we went to Mexico and he dove with us and everything. So it wasn't like Zach was like a new diver or anything, but he
was about 15 at that time, if I remember
Yeah, he
correctly.
was 15 at this time,
Okay.
correct. And so we all went down to San Carlos Beach to do a shore dive. And we had these two small dogs. I took the dogs. Zane was like 8, I think. Yeah, 8. And he was in the car, and Monty had said, I'm going to go in for 15 minutes. We're just going to go in for real quick for 15 minutes, and then we'll be right out. And so.
And Mel, not to interrupt you, but as I recall, the weather was kind of brewing at that time, wasn't it?
Like it was getting to be dusk and evening, and it was getting a little choppy, and I was getting a little nervous, but I always likened it to, like, you get on an airplane. I don't know if everybody does this, but you get on an airplane, you kind of look around and you're like, I hope these aren't the people I'm going down with. You just always have that little onset of nerves.
Sorry.
It was like I know it was my 15-year-old kid who was going on a shore dive. And I always felt like I always had this hypersensitivity looming thing. And so I was like, okay, whatever. Monty was an advanced diver, and, he was our resident Superman. So I figured everything was going to be okay and everything. And so I'm looking through the binoculars, and I see him in the water, and he's telling Zach what to do and everything. And so I'm thinking, okay, they're getting ready to go down. I'm going to run back to the car, because Zane stayed in the car because it was getting brisker. It was getting colder. And so
more brisk.
I went back, more brisk. And so I went to the car to get like towels and stuff, because I just thought I wanted to check on him and get towels. And I remember going back to the car, and I said, Zane was like, I don't want to sit in the car with these dogs. I want to get out. And I said, they're going to be right out. I will come back and get you and everything. And when I came back to the shore, all hell had broken loose. There were people like lined up, because there's like that pier next to there, and everybody's going. People are running around, and I was just thinking, oh my God, Zach, and then I saw them pull someone out, and I'm like, oh my God, thank God it's not Zach. And I looked again, and I was like, oh my God, it's Monty. And I heard Zach in the water. And I'm just like thinking, oh my gosh, but people were tending to Monty. And I kept telling the guys, like, his name is Monty. His name is Monty. Because in my head, I was like, the worst isn't going to happen here. Like, how many people, are underwater for a short amount of time? Because it was a short amount of time, and everything is fine. You hear about it all the time. And I saw them working on him, and I heard Zach in the water. And I just instinctively just swam out to him, and I just said, "Drop everything," because I could hear him crying, but I couldn't. I just heard him crying or wailing or something, because apparently he had come up and asked for help, and that's how it happened. So I said, "Drop everything," and I just said, "Just lay on your back and let's swim to the shore." And then instinctively, like, the rolls I just remember this like it was yesterday, the roles, how they separated. Zach was just caring for me. "It's gonna be okay, mom, it's gonna be okay," and a part of me just didn't at the time think that it was gonna end up the way it did, and, like,
And it sounds like even
Zane
when you went out to check on Zach and he's crying, you're still not making sense of it all because it was so surreal. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely, and I thought, like, "You know what, Monty? This" like, when we are gonna go to the beach, we're gonna go to the beach, we're not gonna dive, like, to me, it was just gonna be, like, an embarrassing inconvenience. I didn't
mhm,
think it was gonna be what it was, and Zane came running down the steps because all the first responders were coming at this point, and, I just saw them working on him, and now I'm just, like, I'm fragmented, I'm tending to the boys, I'm all wet because 'cause I've been in the water, like, they threw us into the fire engine, and I'm, like, wanting to be with my husband and go in the ambulance, but I've got my children, and they're throwing blankets on us, and we're just sitting in the cab of this fire truck, and, like, you're never prepared for something like this, and I just
mm,
said, "Let's just say a prayer." Like, I don't even think I ever prayed with my kids other than, like, nighttime prayers, and that was, like, whatever, and we just started
mhm.
praying and everything, and for some reason, when the fire captain kept coming to check on us, I kept saying, and I don't even know where it came from because I just thought, everything was gonna be fine. I said, "Has he regained consciousness?" Like, what does that mean? Like, I didn't even think, like, that would it was, like, out of body almost.
So you're just
And
you're
s
just you're just thinking, of course he's coming back. I mean, there's no doubt about it. You weren't there thinking, "I'm
the
losing my husband."
worst.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Everybody because everybody also was kinda acting a little bit not casual, but, like, they knew what they were doing, obviously, so there was a
Mhm,
element of calm,
mhm.
but I was tense, and then the fire, captain said, "We're gonna go over to Chomp," and I said, he goes, "You can go with us in the car," and I go, "Well, I have my dogs in the car. Can I follow you?" Like, I really didn't think it was
Yeah.
the outcome was gonna be the outcome, and he's like, "Yeah, sure," it was like, "Yeah, sure, follow us." So I'm thinking, "Okay," and so we're driving to Chomp, and Zach's in the car immediately becoming, like, the male role person going, "Mom, everything's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay," and everything, and I'm like, "Of course it's gonna be okay." And we didn't even follow the ambulance, but we followed the fire captain, and then we met him in the parking lot, and somehow we entered Chomp, like, not in front of the emergency room, but we took this back area, and then I'm starting to feel a little bit tense and everything, and we get in the elevator and somebody recognized the fire captain, they're, like, being all casual, and I'm thinking, "Okay, this is not it's not like it's gonna be okay." Then we come through like I said, so we're coming in the back way of the emergency room, so we're on the other side of the doors of the emergency room, and I see them working on Monty in the hallway, and I start walking that way, and they're like, "No, this way," and I was getting a little bit nervous then, and then so we come out the door, so we're coming out the doors into the waiting room, and there's, like, tons of people, and we look a fright. Zach's in a wetsuit. Zane's just kinda this short, little cute kid, like, "What's going on?" And I'm, like, wet. I'm wearing a sweatshirt and jeans, and I'm just wet. And they're like, "You just sit out here." And I'm like, "Okay." And there was this little alcove there. I couldn't find anything, and people are looking at us like, "What just came through here?" And we kinda huddled together, and we just stood there, and this nurse comes out with her pen on her hand, and she was like, "What's your husband's name?" And I'm thinking, "Okay, everything's cool," she's writing my husband's information on her hand, nothing's wrong and everything, and she's like, "Okay," and acting all sweet, and then someone comes out and they go, "We need to bring you in here," and so they were gonna take us in a private room. And Zach said this is when we got separated because the doctors were coming towards me and had that look on his face like bad news was coming. And I said, "No, no, no, he's that way." And he's like shaking his head. And that's when I just fell to the ground and just wailed like I never had before. It was just so unbelievable. And so I was just like, it was just surreal. And so I was just like, all these things I didn't I mean, from there, I just have to stop here because I just don't even know how to go from there because it was just, so many things came rushing, like, "This isn't
I was
happening,"
gonna
you
say,
know?
what was coming rushing through your head in that moment? Can you remember
I know
what
what it
you
was.
even mm,
It was I can't wait till my because I had the police officers call my, parents, and I thought, "My dad is gonna help make this better." I know this
mm,
sounds bad, but I'm a big daddy's girl, and I just thought, "My dad is gonna turn this around." And I remember my dad coming in, and I go, "Dad, just tell he's 36. He's young. Tell him to do it until make him come back, you know, and everything." And my dad was like, "Okay, I'll see what I can do." And he came back and he said, "He's gone." And I'm like, "He's gone? This is the love of my life. Like, he's gone. Like, no." And I knew I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to call his parents. I had these rush of emotions of like, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? It was all of that. They had me go in and see him, and he looked like he was sleeping. He was just beautiful. You just sit there. You're like, "I don't even wanna be here." Like, it is so
mm,
surreal that um, it's one of those things you wanna be in the moment and you wanna savor every minute of it, but then at the same time, you don't wanna be there, and then you don't realize, like, the minute you leave those doors, your life has changed. I we I had to leave him in Monterey, and we were coming back to Santa Cruz, so already that was huge.
mm.
And then it just, I just remember being in the car. My father took my kids in my car, drove back to Santa Cruz, and I was in the car with my mom, and you just go like I just kept saying, "What are we gonna do? Like, how are we gonna live?" Like, I had
Yeah. You
it's
have
like anybody who
2
receives
babies,
traumatizing news.
2
I know.
2 young boys. You're young, in your 30s.
Yeah.
And you know what I remember about that time, Mel, was, you were all over at our house a few days before for our son's 4th birthday party. And
Yeah,
Monty
Monty was
held our 8 Caroline was about 8 months old? Wasn't
well,
she
she was
like
born in June. She was born
so
in
4
June.
months, 4
Yeah,
4 or 5 months old.
and
Sorry.
he kept saying, let's have a little baby Caroline. Let's have another baby." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think so." But,
Yeah, and I
I
remember
mean,
you
it's
guys all
just
walking out the door with I sent you off with all the, leftover pizza and
pizza.
then I remember getting that call and being in
Shock.
absolute shock and terror for you and hearing your voice on the other end of that call, which is as someone who cares about you and loves you so much, it's a hard it's a hard place to be as a friend not knowing what to do, what to say, how to be, how to comfort, how to encourage, and then that trying to remind yourself, just hold the space, just, just be.
Yeah,
And I remember that so vividly. And even after all these years, Mel, uh, the heaviness of that time and that moment, and not really realizing, even listening to you now sharing some of the details of this, I'm hearing some things for the first time.
that's interesting.
Hmm. And what you said I
Yeah,
thought was so poignant about, I'm trying to savor this moment. There was some awareness you had with Monty lying there, lifeless, but you had some awareness of this time is precious because you had to leave him. And
yeah,
that's just crushing.
it was pretty crazy. It was like that too when you were there and we were at the funeral home. It was that same thing, you know? And that's when we saw him at the funeral home, that's when I knew that he was no longer there. He looked
Mhm.
totally different, and that was there was a certain finality there viewing him there,
Yeah.
and it was like, I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. It was like, um, an emptiness. I mean, Monty and I were together since we were 16, you know? That was like
Yeah.
and here I am, 37, and, you know, I'd lived this lifetime, and we pattern our life where, I was working part-time, like, I wasn't even, I wasn't ready to be a sole income provider either,
Yeah.
like, there were so many challenges
Well,
ahead.
in so many ways, I mean, you've been together forever and you're soulmates, but your lives were just really getting started. And now
For
you're the
sure.
sole, yeah, like you said, sole breadwinner on this sort of part-time job. And how do you shift? What do you do? How do you, your kids were a little bit older then. So let me ask you this. So your dad is obviously a huge comfort to you, and I know that.
Oh my
And
gosh.
it's not lost on me, Mel, to the magnitude of the moment when I was with you at the funeral home the last time you had to say goodbye to Monty in a physical form. Um, I will never forget that day.
That was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Um, moving beyond that time. Now you're back, you're back home. Life is going on and you have to work and you've got these kids. Where was your head at that time?
It's interesting because it was like my dad was I was in the living room, shortly after that the accident, and my dad's talking on the phone like almost talking to people on the phone like I couldn't hear him and I heard everything. Like I know there was a level of shock that
Yeah.
lasted for quite a while, but I remember him saying on the phone to somebody, I think it was somebody at Monty's work because he was notifying them at the FAA, and they asked, "How's she doing?" and, how I'm doing, and my father said, "Well, she's in shock right now, but, I'm sure we'll have a lot of grief that will be coming soon after." And I heard that, and I was like, "Grief? Like, what's grief?" Like, I thought of Charlie Brown, good grief. Like, that's not a palpable emotion. Like, I'm just gonna be upset, but what's grief? And then life hits you. My dad took me to the Social Security office, like, did all of that stuff that you have to do when your spouse dies. And I don't know anybody I didn't know anybody that lost their husband at my age. I guess my
Yeah.
world's really small. You hear about it on TV, but you don't know all the
Mm.
stuff that you have to do right away after your partner dies. And it is painful. You have to take all of his names off everything. You have to go to the Social Security office so you can get benefits, survivor benefits, just so you can make sure that the lights stay on. And my emotions were just like, "I don't care. I don't care." Like, I literally felt like I didn't care, and unfortunately, I was there's a part of grief that can be very narcissistic because you're so, like, caught up in the emotion that you don't think how your behavior is gonna affect your family members who love you. You feel
Mm.
like it's hard to
It
describe. It's
must
like
feel well, and I'm sure with this being the loss of the love of your life, it feels so personal to you because you're in
yeah.
the I mean, it's the biggest crushing blow,
And you
for you.
feel like yeah, you feel like it's not affecting someone else, because it's your relationship, but you don't realize your community is affected by it. I'm sure it
Mhm.
affected you, and I didn't realize it, and
Yeah.
because there was no education for me, like I've told you before, I certainly looked for groups, I looked for books, I looked for anybody. There was no social media at the time. Well, I
Mm.
mean, there was MySpace, but it wasn't
Mhm.
like what it was
Yeah.
now where you had groups. I mean, I literally was, like, on MySpace and looking for widows, young widows, and I found one, who lost her husband to cancer. She must have thought I was a freak that I just, like, randomly said, but I wanted to find some hope in someone because I didn't know anybody, and I
Well, and
and I was
what a lonely place to be.
exactly.
Yeah.
It was it was, the support groups are wonderful to a point, but, you know, um, it just it was an interesting thing. It was almost like you were, like, going to an AA meeting and you're kind of sharing, but you're sharing the same story over and over, and I wasn't finding growth from that.
Hmm.
And it felt weird to me. I understand the concept of it, but I was looking for a sentence that was gonna empower me or do something, and I couldn't find it, and there are stages of grief, definitely, and they're not in an order, and you go revisit some, you meet some, you revisit some, like, one day you might be at acceptance, and then the next day you're at not, and you're at, shock or whatever. I wish
Mhm.
I knew him, but I just, the saddest part was, me feeling so guilty about the death that I felt like I couldn't be responsible for a glass of water. Like, I didn't wanna be responsible for anything because I would destroy it, and I abandoned my children's in a way that way kind of I mean, I was loving to him, but I was so selfishly in my pain that I thought, all I need to do is just keep working, give them their video games and everything, and that's gonna make them happy. But there was a vacancy about me that, that is regretful, but, you know, you would hear statements of like, "So are you gonna start dating?" It's like, "Start dating? This happened, like, 3 months ago." Like, I'm just trying to get up in the morning,
Wow.
and I was, everybody was living their life, and mine had stopped going to the grocery store. And you have
Mm.
those moments of like, "Do those people know that my husband isn't on this earth anymore?" Like, how can they be happy? Like, I was telling you earlier, like, I felt guilty to be happy. I felt guilty to
What do you think the guilt was about? Why did you feel responsible?
um, I think
If I can
well,
ask that, and then maybe that's too
money
personal.
no, I mean, well, there is survivor's guilt, no doubt
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
I think, like, a lot of times my guilt was feeling like I didn't put, I didn't articulate to Monty, like, "Maybe this isn't a good idea to be scuba diving," like, just putting some boundaries, if you will.
Mhm. Mhm.
Everything's hindsight. Hindsight's 20/20 on things. His parents felt guilty because they got into scuba diving
Mm. Okay.
and encouraged him. So, I think it was kind of like that, and I just felt like, I think it's more survivor's guilt. You replay the day in your head and you think like, "What
Mm.
could I have done differently? Why didn't I do things differently?"
Mhm. Mhm.
So, as a
Did you
result go ahead.
so I'm sorry, I just wanted to be clear. So as a result of that, and I'll let you say it,
As
that
a
feeling
result
of not wanting to be responsible for even for a glass of water it was like, I don't wanna I have to just hands off right now with everything and everybody
yeah,
around me. Yeah.
and I was angry. I mean, you could probably recall I was angry, self-medicating. I was working over the hill. I would go over the hill at crazy hours because I was webcasting, which webcasting was great because I didn't have to interface with people a lot.
Mhm.
But I had to drive over the hill in the dark of night sometimes or in the early morning, dark of
Mhm.
night. I mean, I just think wouldn't it have been amazing to have a podcast like this perhaps? That I could have someone I could curate my podcast of similar people to know, like, there is hope. Like,
Mhm.
you know,
You're not alone.
I exactly, and yeah, like, you may not you may feel guilty that you're not that what had happened and feeling joy is not an emotion that you're gonna experience for quite a while. It will return, but the one thing that you can't do is you can't put off the grief train. And I was staying at the station as long as I could by self-medicating, denying, and, just putting it off. I just didn't wanna de I didn't know what grief was, and, I didn't understand what that means, and I am a slow learner on things, and I didn't know anybody outside of, in the circle of life, people losing people.
Mhm.
I didn't know what grief was.
But
My
Melanie, you know what I think too? Sorry, and I'm not to
No.
interrupt, but I was thinking about this recently. When we were growing up in the 70s and 80s, no one was identifying trauma as something to be healed or it's like you don't know that you need to go heal something. You just
Yeah.
you just deal with it, right? I mean, that's kind of that's what I remember. And I had parents who were very sensitive to, my pain or my discomfort. But I remember, it's only been, I think, in the last 10 years of my own life that I've really thought about we have to look at trauma and pain as something to not just deal with, but to heal from. And so
Yeah.
I just think it's part of where we grew up and how we grew up and that wasn't language that we heard or understood. I don't know, and maybe I'm speaking for you. I don't want to do that. I just think generationally, you're not kind of thinking I've got to, move through this and heal this and y- you
No, there
know,
wasn't a lot of information. Our kids, learned how to use their words. They knew how to operate in life. Like, they had a lot of social services. We just kind of had routine. This
yeah,
happens and everything. And, you know, I knew my routine was I need to go back to work. I need to figure out how to,
stay
you
busy.
know, well, not so much stay busy, but pay the bills.
Yeah,
I
of
wasn't
course.
making the money that Monty was making, and, my biggest thing was just to your point, um, growing up in the '70s and '80s, there wasn't a lot of life lessons that way. You knew that people passed on. You didn't know what that looked like. You didn't know what the emotional part was. Mine was about n instinctively for me. I feel like some people are like, "I need to find another partner to fill in that gap and, to take care of things and everything." For me, I felt like I just need to take care of my little tribe myself and move on, and I didn't understand the emotional part, what that looked like.
Mm,
I don't think I lost a friend in high school. And I remember, there wasn't a lot of healing from that. It was odd, it was like it happened, you move forward, but now this isn't my partner, this is my person, and so I felt like if I stayed busy, I would work, everything would come together, it would hurt less.
mhm, mhm,
That's what I thought grief looked like, and then I realized this isn't getting better. And these nights that I would spend at HP, they were like it was like being in a control room at a TV station, my environment. And it was in the dark of night and I was by myself a lot. And I didn't, when I would reach out to you or someone and talk, talk about Debbie Downer. I didn't even know how to articulate my feelings to be like on a path of recovery. And you know, I felt like my grief was inconvenient to people because I don't think people in my tribe knew how to help me. I know that they wanted to, but they
mhm,
didn't know how, and I didn't know how to help me. I didn't I think I told you back in the day, like, "I just wish you could run the mile for me because you do it better, Marilyn. I need you to run the mile for me." And really, the sad thing about this depressiveness and griefness, the person you can only save yourself. So it just feels like a lot of times, what people don't understand, like, and I'm no expert, but, like, when we lose friends to, depression, and I have a family members that, have, mental illness and everything,
Mm,
I always feel like the sad thing is, like, that person, and when they're in so much pain, they have to find somewhere deep inside them to start helping themselves to get better.
yeah.
Like, you do have the support of, like, friends calling you and checking in on you and everything, but,
Mhm.
like, when things aren't getting better, nobody can run that mile for you,
No. You know, Mel,
effectively.
it's interesting when you talk about how deep that pain is. I remember my brother who I lost to suicide,
Yeah.
never thinking in a million years that that would happen for him. 30-year dentist, always seemingly on top of the world, and, I remember after a suicide attempt, I asked him, "How is this even possible that you would wanna end your life?" And I had cancer at the time, breast cancer with 2 young kids, and I was doing everything I could to live.
Yeah.
And I asked him that question. He said, "Oh, Marilyn," he said, "you don't understand. I would never wanna end my life. I just don't know how else to end my pain." The pain was so great that what you're talking about is that wake up moment of, there is help out there. I'm not alone. There's one step I can take today to turn that around. And I think that's what you're speaking to, the depths of that kind of pain.
Yeah, and, it is a choice, and for me, I feel like it is a choice, like, you can either lean into the grief and let it tear you down, or you can choose, and it's hard, and you wouldn't think that it was hard because I have these beautiful boys. I've got an amazing family. I have parents, both my parents and Monty's parents would do anything for Zach and Zane.
Right.
Like, I had
And your
everything.
sister loves you dearly, and yes, and
Yes.
her
Y
family, and yeah, so a lot of
yes,
support, but
I
you still
had,
have to help
an
yourself.
abundance. Yeah,
Mhm.
but, here I am not knowing how to master this grief in a good way. So, like I said, like, my choice was to keep working because nobody can judge me because 'cause I'm, like, working, but I didn't know how to process a lot of things, and a lot of things come up, and I kept, like, saying, "Yeah, grief, I'll see you next week," and everything. I always said, "I'm not moving on." The other thing is people will say, "So, you'll move on." I don't wanna move on, I wanna move forward. That was a big use of words, like, you don't move on from something, you move forward, because moving on made me feel like I'll forget my whole past, my life with my husband and everything. I just
Mhm.
wanna move forward, and then it just seemed like it was taking forever for, n you know, being okay to be joyful or happy in a way.
Mhm.
And I just thought, I was given an opportunity to 6 years later. It's a long time. A lot of people are like, "Is can you wanna come to the party?" "Are you good to be there?" "You gonna lose it?" Um, but I mean, it was really hard to be around people who were married. Your friends change, just
Mm,
everything changes. And and it's a dark path, but then, like I said, one day, 6 years later, I was posed an opportunity to work out with this, international, uh, fitness coach, a Tabata award-winning Tabata coach, and she was doing a new infomercial on her latest, exercising thing. I wish I could say it more eloquently. And so I thought, "You know what? That's an appointment that I can show up for, and I'm gonna do it." And I got really excited, and I was transforming, and I just felt good about myself. I felt like a credibility. I was meeting women who
mm,
had, like, struggles, but it wasn't like, they had personal struggles. A struggle is a struggle, and I just thought you could identify it. And then when you were exercising, you got real raw with your emotions and you got real personal, and that was kind of a therapy moment because, you outside of these workout sessions, you would connect with these women who would get vulnerable and talk about their struggles, and so it started to be like a healthy exercise therapy appointment that I really enjoyed, and then I got really into, like, the little color runs and everything, and I would, like, rally people, "Let's go do a color run," and it became a party and everything, and that's when I started to come out of it because, also, I started to look at my children like, I don't want my children to remember this time, and I was an epic failure. I mean, Zach and Zane was very resilient. Zach and I were so close up until his father died, and he was so upset about how his role changed. There was a lot of friction there and resentment towards me, the way I was handling my grief.
Mm. And he
Um,
had his
you
own grief. He was there.
he was there and he felt like he couldn't
Mm,
save his father.
mm,
We went to therapy, but it just kind of therapy was kind of like just kind of talking about it until it didn't hurt so much. But
hmm.
they're amazing men today, and I'm really proud of the men that they come from. I always make a joke that I'm like, "I'm 2 for 2. Nobody's been in rehab, not even me," like, you know, um, but I just feel like, Zach and I were really close before Monty passed, and then he was very angry and I wasn't he knew I wasn't emotionally present, and that upset him because he's much more sensitive. He's sensitive like me. Zane was very resilient, but Zane never left my side. Zane was always there. And, but now, I mean, when I had that time with that physical trainer, that fitness coach, um, it really kinda turned things around,
Mm.
and,
So would
and
you
it
say
just
it's like getting those endorphins going for the first time,
maybe.
getting, kind of and taking the step, it sounds like when you were using those words to describe um just how you were feeling better about yourself. It sounds like it was really empowering for you at that time.
It really was a discovery of a different person. It was like I was learning the the single mom Mel, if you
Okay.
will.
Okay.
It was like being the single mom Mel. Like my role was a wife, a mother, and now I was like single mom, friend, sister, daughter. Your roles kind of
Everything else.
changed.
Yeah.
And
When did you realize that you know, you choosing happy, that there was choice there? Did that start to become something that you were aware of at that time?
no, I did the whole fake it till you make it kind of thing.
Okay.
I did that a lot. I faked it until I made it because I could see that it was affecting, I was angry. I was even angry with my mom because I just felt like she was able to move forward. I felt like my mom wasn't nurturing me the way I wanted. And you can't ask someone to give you what they don't have. And I don't think my mom had the knowledge on how to deal with something like that.
Mhm.
And I could appreciate the way she loved my children in the absence of me not giving my children the love that they needed. And so I just appreciated her for that. And even when I just felt like maybe my pain was inconvenient to my mother, I was just going to choose to love her for the gifts that she was giving my children. And I would fake the happy there a lot of times to where it wasn't faking anymore.
Mm.
It was just almost like it's like with a job, you go into a
Mhm.
job and you're like, "Yeah, I can do this," and then you kinda have to fake it till you make it, and then it's like, "What was I worried about? Like, I knew this all along."
Mhm.
So I knew this all
And it sounds like
along.
you were tapping into gratitude.
Maybe. Oh, I definitely didn't recognize it then, but I know now that I was grateful for the people in my life. like you don't see it then. And then when you reflect back, that's where kind of you get regretful. But the only thing you can do is radical forgiveness and just say, yeah, I wished I always said like, I always said like my personality was like an operating system like on your iPhone. I'm like, yeah, I'm Melanie 10.0. It's like I'm always rebooting here. So now I'm on Melanie 10.0. And so thank God that Apple's operating software has outlived me because I feel like I'm on 20.0 or something. But
Oh.
I always just felt like, you can always reboot. I
Mhm.
don't think people need to be defined, you know,
Mhm.
by what their tragedies are, like how they behave because it's new, just you learn so much about, being cut off on the road, like, "Oh my gosh, so disrespectful, you're cutting me off." And now I'm kinda like, "Boy, they must be in a hurry, they got something going on." Like,
I
it
wish them well.
switches.
I wish them
I know.
it's
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
I,
Sucks to be
yeah.
you.
Yeah. Hope you get to where you need to go safely.
But it's
Yeah,
not
it's
it's
tough. But
yeah,
how have
so
you so when you say radical forgiveness, is it also radical forgiveness of yourself? Have you been able to get there
I think
for you,
yeah, I mean,
with
there's a
you?
lot of yeah, I think there's a lot of things that I wished I could have done differently in relationships and everything. And instead of walking with guilt, I mean, radical forgiveness on what had happened.
Mhm.
Forgiveness for me is the definition of like giving up the hope that the past could be different.
Mhm.
That's my I know people have different
Hmm.
definitions of forgiveness, but mine is
Can
I
you
stole
say
that
that
from
again?
Oprah.
Say that one more time.
Okay, but I stole it from Oprah, so it's
Okay,
not
it's
like
okay, it's
it's not
powerful.
something but forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could be different.
Huh, that's poignant
I know, I
and
just really like
powerful.
it because I just forgive myself because s I can't stop the journey because I'm feeling guilt over some of the
Mm,
decisions that I made.
yeah,
Maya Angelou, "When you know better, you do better,"
yeah.
kind of thing, so
We had another guest who, had, lost her mother and, baby sister, um, when she was 8 years old to violence, to murder, and she said something that really hit me, and she said, "That was one moment, one day, and there have been so many hours and days and moments since then
yeah.
that I have to choose to maximize my life. I have to choose to be here now. And I have to choose to do something that shifts the cycle of generational pain. How do you
Yeah,
think,
I can see that.
what do you think you've done to, now, looking back, what is that moment that you think you've done to shift the, the trajectory for your boys, for yourself, moving forward from this moment on?
When we go to the beach, we actually have a picnic. We no, I don't mean to be silly. Gosh, I just think, like, being present is so important. I think a lot of my time when I was putting off grief and I was self-medicating, I think it's unfortunate that I wasn't present and authentic, and I really choose my words. I choose my words when speaking to my kids more so now. I never really understood the gravity of my words because
Mm,
I felt like I was always on the same level with them, but they were always giving me deference to say like, "You're my mom, like, your opinion matters." So I really am, um present with them and I choose my words in a way that's going to empower them and feel respected. I would complain a lot to my kids about how, the mundane things in our household that you wished you had your partner here and, things that you wanted them to handle, that you wanted them to deal with because that gave you relief, like dealing with your children and everything. And, I've had those moments of feeling those, frustrations and then realizing in a flip, like, "You got this. You've had this all along. You got this." And what a great way to deal with something that you would have given to Monty to handle, that you got this, and you can think of him saying, "I did it. I handled this. I didn't make you handle this." Like I had plumbing issues recently and, I just felt overwhelmed. Like, what am I going to do? It's going to cost a lot. Da, da, da. And that's when you go in the rabbit hole. And I just feel like now you can find a certain strength and empowerment out of I think, in the worst circumstances. Like, I felt like I remember seeing you in the hospital and, you were you weren't looking too good. You looked you looked like your father. I remember walking into the hospital.
I always said I
Sorry.
looked like an out of work retired wrestler who was not a champion. Is
Yeah,
that
I
pretty good?
mean,
Yeah, I was looking
I think
pretty
so. I
puffy.
just remember I went unannounced to Chomp, and I walked in with, like, a bunch of magazines and,
I wasn't
I
reading
felt
magazines at the
I
time.
I know, because when I looked at you, you were like, "Hey, Mel," and I was like, "Oh god,"
Yeah, yeah, that was
But by the
scary.
time and I remember we went into we went to your room, and I remember you looked at me and you said, "Mel, I don't think I'm ever gonna walk the beach again." And I was, like, looking at you like, "This is not this is my rock. This is like my soul sister." For her to say that, and somehow inside me, I was like, "Yeah, you are. You're gonna
Mm.
be walking that beach again." And I'm gonna come down and have lunch with you and walk that beach. I mean, you look pretty bad, and you had that little solar daisy on your windowsill. I like
My
was kinda
sister
going,
brought that.
I know, it was cute, but it just kinda added a little bit of
Creepy. Oh
And I just
god.
remember in that moment when I still was kinda in my stuff and everything, but I rose above it, like,
Mm,
somehow you gave me the strength to of encouragement and everything, and I believed it when I said it, like, I
mm,
was
mm.
it kind of, like, made me feel a little like I said, that selfishness or that narcissistic behavior that you have when you're in your stuff so much, like, going outside and learning about other people's stories kinda give you perspective on, like, it's nobody's voided of is it gonna avoid a traumatic experience in their life, and
Yeah,
some are gonna be worse than others, but you can still find some kind of strength and inspiration and love
yeah.
with it all, and, looking at you, I mean, and you saying that broke my heart like you wouldn't believe. Like, it just, like, gutted me,
Mm,
and it made me realize, like, I have so much to be thankful for, grateful for, like
uh,
you said, and I could not imagine my world I'm gonna get, teary-eyed, but I didn't wanna have a world without you in it,
oh, Mel.
and it was just like, "Get your shit together," Mel, like,
Get it
come
together right
on.
now. No,
I know, right?
no, I'm teasing.
A
I no,
and
I'm so
s
touched because I know that that is such a real feeling between us and such a bond between us. And we both have watched each other go through some pretty horrific things. And
Uh-huh.
I think that's the key when you talk about the gratitude for where we are now. Because I
Yeah.
remember thinking I'm not gonna walk that beach again. And then I was in the Aegean Sea in Greece swimming in the ocean, and I remember just the tears of awe and joy, and taking that moment to imprint that moment that here I am doing it. Not only am I walking the beach in my hometown, but I'm far away from home, and I'm swimming, and I'm free in new health. And I think what you mentioned about we all may not have the same kind of grief or trauma or tragic experiences, but we all know what joy feels like. At some point in our lives, we know what that feels like. We know what pain feels like. We know what sadness
Mhm.
feels like. We know, and that's where empathy comes from. We could feel for each other. And tapping into that is what keeps us connected and keeps us remembering. You know, when I see someone who is living on the street and I drive by and I think, "Oh, what is their plight? How did they" it doesn't matter how they got there. How did they get there? Doesn't matter to me. It's they're there and they're suffering. Because I remember my brother, and my brother showed me, and he didn't live on the streets, but he could have been heading in that direction. And I remember thinking, his illness, his level of sickness, um, was so great that he could have ended up in a situation where he had nobody. So there's something there, you know, that connects us all, that we can stop and reflect for just a moment and think,
Mhm.
okay, we don't understand what this person's been through, but they've been through something,
Yeah.
and just send a good thought, you know. And so I hear you on that. I wanted to ask you, are you still on the grief train?
Um, I don't I don't think so. I mean, there are moments that, I think I'm more on the wisdom train at this point, you know what I mean?
Yes, I
Like,
do.
I think I have a lot more wisdom about it. I can't say that I've identified it. I mean, I miss money every day of my life, you know? Um, I do get emotional about it, but I don't think I'm grieving. I've suffered some loss since then, like, his mother passing away was a big deal to me because we bonded. It was
Yeah.
like she was like my
She was a
second that I
catalyst
could.
to him
Yeah,
too.
it was my
Yeah.
connection to him.
Yeah.
And so there has been some losses, and it's changed family dynamics and everything too, because she was kind of my connection to that side. Um, I do find it interesting, like, I think my youngest, Zane, was into sports, like his dad playing soccer, and Zane is much more intellectual and a different person. I always think it's interesting to think, like, if his dad was here, how that would have made him like a different kind of person maybe.
Mhm.
Zane gave up sports after his father died because he wasn't there, but he's turned out to be a stellar man. But I always think about things like that. How life would have been had Monty stayed, been here and hadn't left, I don't want to say muerta, but had he stayed, how things would have been. But I do think, like, time goes so fast. It feels like
Yeah,
it's so
sure
fast.
does. Sure does.
And I have a great appreciation of family. I have a great appreciation of relationships that, you know, I mean, you and I used to talk every day back in the day, when we were, and I think that's kind of like a young thing that you spoke every day on the phone. But I have a great appreciation of friends in my life that are lifetime friends that I don't speak to every day, but when I speak to them, it's you pick up and you catch up, and it feels so empowering and rich and blessed. And, I I feel the value of the support group, like, they say, have 4 quarters or 100 pennies of friends, and I'm getting to that place where I want 4 quarters,
Mm,
and I think it's just the
quality.
wisdom. Yeah, and the
Yeah.
quality time, and I just think, um, the grief part morphs into wisdom to where I want to understand why this is coming, and I don't feel like I'm running from grief anymore. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's just part of my story. It's not my story.
Yeah.
You don't want I think a lot of people, they say that a lot, like, I don't want my trauma or whatever to identify me. I don't want it to be the defining
Yeah.
of my person. I want to be able to have it change into a pretty picture, if you will. I don't know if
No,
that
I
makes
I
sense.
understand that. And I think when we learn to turn into the fear or turn into the pain and actually
Yeah.
sit with it, feel it, like really sit in there long enough to feel, you realize that it doesn't last as long as you
Yeah,
think it's going to last. And what we
exactly.
perpetuate with our own minds is what keeps it going on. But really, when we face it straight up and summon that courage to just be with it, there's something so empowering about that. Even if I have a headache, sometimes I sit and before I go get some Advil,
Yeah.
I'll sit and think, okay, can I just sit with this pain for a minute? And when I
Mhm.
really observe it and feel it, it lessens. There's something so powerful of our own awareness of what's happening in our bodies, what's happening in our minds. And
Yeah,
it becomes a little superpower, I think. And it makes you feel
totally.
less afraid because
And
whatever
you
comes
learn
down
more
the
about
pike.
yourself.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Before we
Sorry.
go, I want to know what is one thing that someone listening out there who might be in your situation and you didn't have that person, at
Yeah.
36, what do you hope they walk away with? And how can they choose their happy?
If I could effectively speak to the person that you're telling me to speak to that was me when this happened,
Hmm.
first of all, I think there's so much more resources out there with podcasts and everything. I think that, for one, you're gonna feel alone in your pain no matter what, and it's so cliche, but you're not alone. Like, do not miss the signs of love and support. Even if you're angry or you're resentful, try not to shun that. You
Mm.
know, make space for it, but then if it's too much, like, retreat to your space. But just try and be kind to yourself. That is like, when so many of my friends now that have lost their husbands, like, now I know a lot of people that have lost their
Mm.
husbands at a young age, I would say to them at the very beginning, like, "Just be kind to yourself." Like, be present and be kind, and know that you're not alone. Like, really embrace, like when I say embrace, I don't mean the gravity of embrace, but just know that if you're patient with yourself and you're kind to yourself, it's gonna get better.
Mhm.
And yeah, happiness is a choice, and you may not be ready for it today. You may not be ready to choose to be happy, but one day it'll be a huge gift you give yourself. And just become the friend to yourself and know, like, you know, it's gonna get better, and sometimes it's gonna get better, it's gonna get worse, it's gonna get better, it's gonna get worse.
That's
But
life.
it's gonna, yeah. And tragedy is unavoidable to everyone. It comes in different forms. But I hope I answered that well, because I do think, like, for me, it was really a point of finding someone I could relate to that could give me the wisdom. And the reality is the wisdom is within yourself. It's how
Mhm.
you tap into it, after the dust is settled, I guess.
Ah, you are
I don't
one
know.
wise woman. And that was Melanie Hatchett. I will always and forever hold her words sacred, riding the grief train to riding the wisdom train. Wow, those are really profound words. And she is so inspiring. Her strength is a motivator just to keep going and going. And I thought she articulated it all so beautifully and with so much heart and honesty and candor and humor. And I think that's the key as well. Thank you so much for joining us on I Choose Happy, presented by The Comfy. If you'd like to continue these conversations, just join us in our I Choose Happy Facebook group. I'm in there every day, and it's a sacred, safe place for all of us to share what's on our hearts. And if that's something that sounds interesting to you, just go to Facebook and look for the I Choose Happy group. Thank you so much for joining us here on I Choose Happy, presented by The Comfy. We'll see you next time.